So there's a reporter, a child's doctor, mom, and birth to 3 coordinator, and that's how we set it up.
You say I'm the reporter.
Hi, I'm the reporter. I'm the doctor.
I'm the mother.
And I'm a birth to 3 coordinator.
Okay. So on tonight's episode of 12 Minutes, we're looking at a rare genetic disorder called Williams syndrome, also known as WS. The disorder is so rare, in fact, that estimates for its prevalence range from 1 in 20,000 to 1 in 7,500. It is possible that the disorder was underdiagnosed in the past due to a lack of understanding of genetics. Joining us now is Joan Smith, the mother of Evan, who has WS. Also with us tonight is Dr. Tanner, who has been treating Evan and other children with WS for over 10 years. Our last guest will be Mia Johnson, Evan's birth to 3 service coordinator, who arranges therapies for Evan and children with many other genetic disorders and disabilities. To begin, doctor, would you mind explaining to us what exactly WS is?
WS is a rare genetic disorder caused by a lack of genetic material on chromosome 7. The material that is absent in children with WS is supposed to contain more than 25 genes. When mothers and fathers' reproductive cells are dividing, something goes wrong and these genes are deleted. But the exact mechanism by which the deletion occurs is still unknown. This lack of genetic material results in developmental delays which range from mild to severe, learning disabilities, and cardiovascular issues caused by misregulation of the protein elastin. Key features of WS include hypersociability and elfish features such as a small upturned nose, full and long lips, and small chins. Our interesting phenomenon that we see in some individuals with WS is an increased affinity for music, which is correlated with differences in the primary auditory cortex. The exact neural mechanism by which the affinity for music develops is the topic of emerging research.
And at what point in the lifespan is this disorder typically identified?
Sure, many children with WS presents in children at their birth and is typically recognized early in life by pediatric doctors because of physical characteristics associated with the disorder. Doctors' suspicions are confirmed using blood tests. More specifically, the test used is known as fluorescent in situ hybridization, or FISH, that is able to detect the deletion of specific genes on chromosome 7. In some cases, however, symptoms of WS may not be apparent and diagnosed until later childhood.
And are there any known means of prevention for WS?
Because our current understanding of why and how WS occurs is still unclear, there are no known means of prevention. However, prenatal testing is available to individuals who are trying to have children and have a family history of WS.
So you mentioned previously that WS is associated with severe cardiovascular issues. How are these issues addressed, and how do they affect the quality of life of children with WS?
Actually, the treatment of the cardiovascular issues associated with WS is very controversial within the medical community. For example, one of the conditions associated in WS is peripheral pulmonary artery stenosis, but professionals within the medical community still quarrel over which methods of treatment led to the best prognosis. However, in spite of all medical and surgical interventions the sciences has to offer, the individuals with WS live a shortened lifespan.
Could you elaborate on the medical and surgical interventions available to children with WS that you just mentioned?
Sure. Many children with WS experience hypercalcemia or excess calcium levels. This is treated intravenously with Piametro. Additionally, many children with WS experience hypothyroidism, which can be controlled using pharmaceuticals. As mentioned previously, many children with WS have heart defects such as peripheral pulmonary artery stenosis that requires cardiovascular surgery. Lastly, where there are aspects of physical and language development that differ in children with WS, which are remedied using physical, occupational, and speech language therapy. but these services are probably better described by Evan's Birth to Three coordinator, Mia Johnson.
Yes, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech language therapy are all services that I coordinate for Evan and his family. Physical therapy is useful for Evan and other children with Williams syndrome because many people with this disorder reach their physical developmental milestones, such as sitting up without assistance, crawling, and walking later than their peers due to their low muscle tone. Evan's PT works with him to strengthen the muscles involved in such gross motor tasks. Evan's OT, on the other hand, works with him to strengthen his muscles that are involved with fine motor tasks such as feeding, dressing, and other self-care routines, as well as writing. His SOP works in sync with the OT to improve his feeding routines, as well as his oral motor development.
This next question can be answered by both Evan's mother and by Mia. Based on your experience, how effective are these services? How do they affect Evan's overall prognosis and quality of life?
With the proper support, such as the services provided by Birth to Three, children with WS can progress dramatically and ultimately live independently while completing a high level of education. Birth to Three services are provided to all children in the state of Connecticut who have developmental delays or who have physical or mental conditions that are expected to lead to developmental delays. This is all under Part C of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. Other states may provide these interventions to children using a service other than Birth to Three, but the basic principle is the same across all states. However, once the child is age 3, the interventions provided vary based on the school system in which the child is enrolled. Thus, there is a lot of variability in the prognosis for children with WS, based on the resources of the family, school, and community that the child is in.
I've seen a lot of improvement in Evan's development. Every day, the gap between Evan and his peers closes just a little bit more in terms of physical and language development. At home, I've noticed that Evan is becoming much more independent in terms of self-care, which allows my husband and I more time to take care of ourselves. The Individualized Family Service Plan, or IFSP, that Mia helped us to devise really takes into account our goals and resources as a family, so that Evan's therapies can be integrated into our daily routines as much as possible. The therapies are provided in a way that really involves the whole family, rather than taking Evan out of the house to a doctor's office or some other place where the services provided could not be replicated within our own home, in our own time, and in our own way. For now, everything is great, but I worry for when Evan turns 3 years old and we can no longer receive Birth to Three services. The IFSP is designed to ease this transition, but it's still very stressful to think about.
And what about the transition in particular worries you?
Well, one of the core features of WS is excessive sociability and impaired judgment, particularly in social situations. Therefore, Evan's transition into a typical elementary school classroom may be distracting to his learning process. Furthermore, in all likelihood, Evan will be behind his peers in many academic areas due to his cognitive and language impairments. It may be a struggle to find the perfect balance between inclusion and the individualized attention that Evan will need. In terms of mathematics, Evan will most likely need more individualized attention from a special education teacher due to his impairments in problem solving. However, Evan may be able to succeed in a more integrated setting with delineated support from a paraprofessional for reading and writing classes because these skills are typically better developed in children with WS.
Yes, to add to what Joan said, Evan's physical, occupational, and speech language therapy will no longer be provided in the family setting that is under the IFSP. When Evan enrolls in his town's public school, they will create an individualized education plan which will outline the provisions for providing these services in a more segregated setting.
Mrs. Smith, you mentioned that you anticipate some difficulties in integrating Evan into a typical elementary school classroom. What other family challenges and issues do you experience or foresee that are linked to the features of WS?
As I touched upon previously, Evan is extremely social and highly distractible. This can make everyday activities such as eating and dressing take much longer than it would for a family with typically developing children. Furthermore, Evan has many more doctors and doctor's appointments than a child without WS. The cost of his medical conditions is extremely high and has consequences that resonate throughout the family. We have to budget our money differently than a family with perfectly healthy children. We also have to budget our time differently. We are constantly asking ourselves, who's going to take Evan to his doctor's appointment? Will we need to take off from work? If so, how will we make those hours up? They can be really hard. And as for challenges that I foresee, it is still unknown how independently Evan will be able to live. Who will take care of Evan once his father and I are gone? Will he be able to have a job? The answers to these questions are still unknown because Evan is so young.
And what are some questions or concerns that you have for Evan at his current age?
I worry that Evan will be treated unfairly because of the prejudices and stigmas that surround WS and disability in general. There's a huge myth that children with WS have savant-like language skills. In reality, children with WS have advanced language skills only when you compare them to their other skills, but not in relation to the language skills of their peers. If people don't understand this, they may be unwilling to provide Evan the speech-language supports that he requires. There's also the belief that people with WS are always happy. And while it's true that Evan and many other people with WS are extremely social, they are also emotionally complex. The social isolation and discrimination that often accompanies disability would be devastating for Evan and could lead to depression. What if no one wants to educate Evan because they just assume he can't succeed? And lastly, I worry that Evan may not receive the supports that he needs because WS is so rare, and there is such little research on what strategies do and do not work for other people with this condition. There's a huge lack of awareness that's truly concerning.
Are there any advocacy groups in particular that have helped your family cope with Evan's diagnosis?
The Williams Syndrome Association, National Organization for Rare Blood Disorders, and National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute all have really great information on their websites, seen on the screen, that help me to understand Evan's condition a lot better. Through these groups, I have been able to connect with other parents whose children have WS or other similar conditions and receive support from them.
And for anyone looking to gather additional information on WS, whether it be out of personal curiosity or concern for someone you know who has WS, you can visit www.williamssyndrome.org or www.rarediseases.org. Thank you to Mrs. Smith, Dr. Tanner, and Mia Johnson for joining us tonight.